What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one we'll break down what's going on with NIO stock and what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to break down why tomorrow is going to be an absolutely massive day for the entire stock market as I break down SPY, Tesla, and the QQQ because we have CPI coming out for tomorrow, and that's going to be massive. Before I break down what's going on with the markets, how CPI may look looking at the previous data, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer runs very soon, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. NIO is up 0.28% for the day, holding up quite decently, but it did see some sideways action. I was predicting yesterday that NIO would get a nice pop in the morning, and then this thing would start cooling off as time went on, just trade sideways for the majority of the day. Instead, NIO actually saw some downside. So it saw the upside during the pre-market, then it saw some downside by the time the market opened, got this pop a little bit differently from expected, and then just traded sideways as I did expect. So I was kind of close, but not entirely correct, but it is what it is, right? We did see sideways price action for the majority of the day, as I did predict. And overall, NIO is still very flat and somewhat in the green. So overall, pretty okay day for NIO, but the market did see a very nice pump at the very end of the day. We were sideways for a large chunk of the day before getting one last pump. And the market is still very excited about CPI data that's coming out. We can see right over here the Dow Industrials is up about 1.6%. The S&P 500 is up the second most at 0.9%. And the Nasdaq's up a little bit less, but still holding up quite decently as we're expecting a decent CPI. So what's so big about tomorrow? We have CPI coming out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. So that's going to be the time in New York. The time on my screen is adjusted for the West Coast, so it is a little bit different. But basically 1 hour before the market opens tomorrow, CPI and core CPI are going to be coming out. Year over year, these are going to be the two biggest metrics to look at. We're expecting about a 3.2% CPI, a big drop in CPI for June. But for core CPI, we're expecting about 5%. So core is kind of lagging behind, a lot more sticky because CPI is being adjusted due to energy nuances. For now, there's some very, very low expectations for CPI. But for core, we're expecting it to be a little bit hotter, and we're just going to have to wait and see how that goes. The market's very optimistic approaching it. I also want to add that 15 minutes after the market opens, Kashkari is going to be giving a speech from the Fed. Then after that, at about 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, so that's in New York time, we have Bostic giving another speech, and this guy was a little bit more hawkish the last time he spoke. Then we have Mestre at the end of the day, and Beige, I forgot about Beige. Beige Book is going to be giving a speech as well from the Fed at about 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So every couple of hours, we have lots of Fed speakers coming again. They're going to be somewhat significant, but not super significant. The most significant thing is going to be the CPI report. That's going to be huge. What's so big about it? It's going to dictate, the Fed's policies and what they end up doing moving forward. Looking at the data, there's a 92% probability of the Fed giving us another rate hike, and it's very likely that's going to happen at this point going forward because the economy is still showing some strength, especially in the jobs sectors. The private sector specifically is still pretty strong with those jobs being added, so we have to be careful with policy like this. But the Fed is also going to be paying very close attention to CPI. Looking at the current data, the blue line right here is showing CPI on a big decline since June of 2022. That's when we saw this thing peak. Now, historically, we sometimes see CPI go up a little bit around the June period. Not a guarantee this time around because I think the trend has been very strong to the downside, and almost every CPI of this year that came out was as expected or lower. Now, what is more important than just CPI, though, is core CPI. The expectation for this is kind of high at about 5% still, and it tends to be very sticky. You can see it hasn't really moved that much over the last six months. It's been kind of stuck at this high level, and that's what tends to happen when inflation is very sticky. So we're going to be watching core CPI specifically. That is CPI for all items except for food and energy. So look at the purple line right here. You could see it's kind of like stuck at this high level. We need to see this start to go down over time, and we're expecting around 5%. Let's hope we get something very close to 5% or lower. If we get a decent CPI aligning with expectations at 3.2%, and the numbers are right here, by the way. So the expectation year over year for CPI, it's right here. We want 3.2% for CPI for all items, and that includes like energy and food. For core, we want it to be around 5%. I just want to clarify this. 5% is what we're looking for. So if we get A core CPI, the purple line, is lower than 5% or around 5%. That's going to be decent for the markets. If CPI itself is very close to expectations at like 3.2%, or maybe even like a little bit very, very close to it or lower, the market's going to respond very positively. If we get a low CPI, low inflation, the market's going to like it. Obviously, we want to see inflation come down to the 2% target. That's what the market wants. If it's as expected, the market could still respond positively to it. But if it's higher than expected, if we see core especially higher, because there's a higher risk of that happening, that could be a little concerning. Also, remember that the expectation is very low for CPI, so I'm going to be a little bit cautious approaching that, but I do believe the odds favor a decline to perpetuate. All right, so I'm still in the middle, maybe leaning a little bit more bullish for tomorrow, looking at the technicals I'm going to show you. I think there's a good chance we're going to get a decent CPI, but core is going to be just as important, if not more important overall. And I think it's going to be very close to expectations, if not a little bit lower. I think we're going to get a core around 5% or lower. And I think the market's going to like it. Now, for earnings coming out, just to be very brief, nothing really much is coming out for tomorrow. We have like Thera Technologies, just a couple of them. But Thursday and Friday are going to be more significant, as we have PepsiCo, Progressive, and just a couple of others for Thursday. And then for Friday, we have JP Morgan Chase, we have Citi, we have Wells Fargo, State Street, and BlackRock all reporting earnings. Lots of big banks for Friday. Make sure you are ready for that. To add on to this, when it comes to NIO now, we have some good news that came out. NIO right over here is basically showing these documents that suggest that NIO has the 577-mile range, 150 kilowatt solid state battery getting ready for deliveries as soon as July. I believe that's what it says right over here, starting in July. That is once again some very, very good news. I want to close this ad. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, all these ads just keep popping up spontaneously. I'm sorry about that. But anyways, that's going to be some good news for NIO. It looks like there's more and more behind the 150 kilowatt hour semi-solid battery state, which is so awesome for them. It's going to incentivize more and more buyers to come in, more and more people to continue to buy into NIO, buy into their vehicles, and continue to be very excited for what's about to come. The ES6 has lots of pre-orders. We're starting to see a new battery that's much more dense. It's much more energy dense than like the other ones they use. And it's very, very efficient. It's going to help them with longer ranges. I think people are going to be very excited about this. I believe it could go like 933 kilometers on a single charge or something close to that, almost 1,000 kilometers. But it's a little bit less than that for the ES6 specifically. But still, I mean, it could actually go pretty far on a single charge or just one swap, and it's very, very good for their car. It also looks very luxurious. If you look at like the ES6, for example, the interior and things like that, very, very beautiful looking vehicle. The interior is very nice as well. I mean, I just can't wait to see what's going to happen moving forward. Anyways, when it comes to NIO from a technical standpoint, I just want to add that NIO is still starting to outperform the market. NIO has relative strength, lots of volume, lots of buyers still existent, and it's holding the line quite well. On top of that, a lot of these data metrics don't really matter that much because CPI is going to dictate it a lot more. But the short interest did go up just a little bit at about 11 million the last time it was reported. So be a little bit careful in case we do see more shorting to manipulate NIO. NIO had a high volume at 69 million. There's a lot of excitement about the new semi-solid state battery. And on top of that, there's a lot of hype after NIO had those strong, decent deliveries. So what am I seeing for tomorrow? Honestly, guys, I don't know what's going to happen exactly because it depends heavily on CPI. If we get a really nice pump, I actually have my levels here. Let me see if they pull up. If we get a good CPI, right, I just talked about the numbers in the earlier part of this video. If core is lower than 5% and CPI itself is in the 3% area, the low 3% area, we're going to see NIO fly all the way up to 11 plus, make its way up to about 11.27 or so, maybe even to the mid 11s if it breaks out that hard. If we get a very hot CPI and the whole market gets a rug pull, right, if CPI is like 3.7% to 4% or even higher than that, and then core is like 5.1%, for example, right? Higher than expected. We're going to see NIO come down to about 10.66 and break all the way down to 10.4 into the lower 10s. That's very likely to happen because the whole market's going to move similarly, and the Nasdaq's going to determine how this moves. Why is this so important? If CPI is hot again, the Fed is going to be incentivized to raise rates again. If the Fed keeps raising rates over and over and over again, the stock market is going to drop. The economy is going to take a bigger hit. The recession is more likely to be a lot more severe than what is being reported by the Fed. I want to make that as clear as possible. That's why it's very important to look at information like this. If we get a decent CPI, we're going to see SPY make its way all the way up to at least 444 in my opinion. That was the previous high we made, like right about here. So we're gonna be watching. Could we make our way all the way up? I'm gonna switch to the 30 minutes time frame just for more confirmation. If we hide the drawings, it looks like a nice cup and handle is forming on SPY. So the odds do favor this thing breaking out above 444. That's a real possibility. Excuse me, sorry guys. It's a real possibility. It's a guarantee, not necessarily. But I'm going to be watching if this thing can break above 444. If it does so, it's going to go flying much higher than that. Now, if this thing fails to break out, if it ends up breaking below 440 and comes all the way down to like 436 or so, this is likely going to happen because of CPI, just so that you guys are prepared anyways. Even though it does look more bullish from a technical standpoint, always be prepared. If CPI is hot, it's going to come all the way down to like 436 or so. So a big move is coming tomorrow. Please be ready. We're either going to see SPY crash or see a very, very big move to the upside. For Tesla, it's the same thing. If we're bullish after CPI, there's a possible cup and handle forming. We could see Tesla try to push up to about this. Let's just double check this. At least 276 I would be looking at. I think it's going to break above 276 at the very least if we get a very good CPI. If CPI is bad, it's going to retest 265. If that fails, it's going to come down to 262. Watch that very carefully on Tesla. Last but not least, for the triple Q, if we get a good CPI, I mean, we have this cup and handle on the QQQ as well. If CPI is good, I'm expecting the triple Q to break above 372.8. I think it's going to try to break this resistance and push up closer to like 374. If we get a hot CPI that's higher than expected, we're going to see the triple Q come all the way down to 363 or lower than that. What do I think is more likely? Well, I'm in the middle because I'm always prepared for anything, but I am predicting we're going to see this cup and handle play out and the market pump more. Why do I say that? Because the technicals look good. The historical data is still suggesting a downtrend in CPI, and previous data does tend to affect the new data that's coming out. So, for example, when CPI was up here, just for instance, guys, when CPI was at 9%, right, there's no way the next CPI is going to be all the way down to like 3%, right, if it's already this high. So the previous data tends to affect it. So if September was around, like, for instance, like 8%, the next CPI would not be all the way up at like 11% or all the way down to like 3%. It ended up being very close. The previous months tend to be close to the current ones. They tend to be relatively close. So there's a good chance we're going to see something very close again to this 4% area for CPI, maybe a little bit lower since there's a strong downtrend, maybe somewhere in the threes, which could be very close to expectations. For core, it's kind of flat right now. You could see how the previous data is still suggesting it's kind of like sticky. We're likely going to see it around 5% in my opinion, maybe a little bit lower. My guess would be like 4.9%. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I'm leaning a little bit more bullish, but just to be safe, always look at the data. All right, guys. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys are prepared for everything. Remain calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys in the next one. NIO and the markets to the moons. The long term is still incredibly bright. And peace out.